You did everything right last night. You cooked a proper meal, stored the leftovers in the fridge, and today you are going to heat them right back up. Responsible, practical, sensible. But here is the thing, nobody tells you about that habit. And I want you to stay with me because this is important. There are 5 specific foods in that fridge right now that, when reheated the wrong way, may gradually increase your biological load of compounds linked to pancreatic cancer. Not immediately, not dramatically, but over months and years, the quiet accumulation matters, especially when you are over 60. I am going to show you exactly which 5 foods they are, why the science says what it says, and, this is the part that actually matters, what to do instead so you can keep eating the foods you love without the risk. Stay with me, because food number 3 is one almost every American household reheats every single week, and it is the one that surprised me the most. Welcome. I am Dr. Chen. This channel is dedicated to evidence-based senior nutrition, cutting through the noise so you have the real information you need to protect your health and your independence as you age. If that is why you are here, subscribe. I put out a new video every day. Now, let us get into it. Before we get to the 5 foods, I need to give you 2 minutes of real science, because once you understand this mechanism, everything else will make complete sense. When you cook food for the first time, heat drives a chemical process called the Maillard reaction. You know it as browning, that golden crust on bread, the sear on a piece of chicken, the color in roasted potatoes. The Maillard reaction is actually the reason food tastes good. It creates flavor compounds, appealing color, and aroma. But here's what the food industry has known for decades, and most of us were never taught. The Maillard reaction also generates a class of compounds called advanced glycation end products, or AGEs, along with heterocyclic aromatic amines, or HAAs, and in starchy foods, a compound called acrylamide. Think of it this way. Imagine your arteries as garden hoses. AGEs are like mineral deposits that build up inside the hose over time, stiffening it, narrowing it, reducing flow. Now apply that same analogy to the cells of your pancreas. When AGEs accumulate inside pancreatic tissue, they trigger a self-reinforcing cycle of oxidative stress and inflammation. And prolonged inflammation in the pancreas is one of the recognized biological preconditions for cellular dysregulation, the kind that, over time, can contribute to cancer formation. The International Agency for Research on Cancer, the IARC, which is the gold standard for carcinogen classification, has classified acrylamide as a Group 2A probable human carcinogen. Heterocyclic amines fall in the same category. These are not fringe theories, these are mainstream institutional findings. Now, and this is the critical part, these compounds are not just produced on first cook. Every time you reheat certain foods, especially past certain temperatures and with certain compositions, these compounds either increase in concentration or, in the case of bacterial toxins from improperly stored starchy foods, transform into a new category of risk altogether. The pancreas, unlike the liver or the gut, has very limited regenerative capacity. The pancreatic cells responsible for producing digestive enzymes, called acinar cells, are particularly vulnerable to sustained oxidative stress. This is part of why pancreatic cancer, once it develops, is so difficult to treat. In 2025, approximately 67,440 Americans received a new pancreatic cancer diagnosis. The 5-year survival rate sits at just 13%, and for those diagnosed with the most advanced form, it drops to 8%. Most diagnoses happen between the ages of 65 and 74. That is not a coincidence. It is the result of decades of accumulated cellular damage. You cannot change your age, but you can change your kitchen habits. That is what this video is for. Let us go through the 5 foods. I want to start here because this one has the deepest research behind it. Processed meats, sausages, hot dogs, deli meats, smoked bacon, cured hams, are already preserved with nitrates and nitrites. These are the compounds that give them their pink color and extend shelf life. On their own, at room temperature, nitrites are not acutely dangerous. But when you reheat processed meats, particularly at high heat, in a frying pan, under a broiler, or even in a microwave that creates hotspots, the nitrites react with protein breakdown products to form compounds called nitrosamines. Nitrosamines are N-nitroso compounds. The World Health Organization and the IARC classify these as probable human carcinogens, with particular associations to gastrointestinal cancers, and the pancreas sits directly within that biological pathway. What makes reheating specifically problematic is the temperature dynamic. The first cook sets the chemistry. The second cook, particularly if it approaches or exceeds 300 degrees Fahrenheit, accelerates the nitrosamine formation curve exponentially. Each subsequent reheating compounds this effect. For seniors over 60, this matters more. As we age, our antioxidant enzyme systems, the body's internal cleanup crew for these compounds, become less efficient. A 35-year-old metabolizing reheated sausage has a more robust cellular defense response than a 70-year-old doing the same thing. The pro tip here is simple. Do not reheat processed meats at all. If you enjoy sausage or deli meat in your diet, eat it cold, sliced onto a sandwich or a salad. Or if you want it warm, heat it gently once on low heat, just until it reaches food-safe temperature, and stop there. Never refry leftover sausages or bacon. And if you are on a budget and processed meats are part of your regular routine, consider swapping one serving per week for a plant-based protein. Not as a moral statement, as a biological one. The data supports it. This one surprises people. Rice seems so benign, so neutral. It is just rice. But uncooked rice naturally carries spores of a bacterium called Bacillus cereus. Cooking kills the active bacteria, but the spores survive. Here is the critical point. When cooked rice sits at room temperature, even for 2 to 3 hours, those spores germinate, multiply, and begin producing toxins. And those toxins are heat stable. That means putting the rice back in the microwave does not neutralize them. You are simply warming up rice that is already contaminated. Now, the direct connection to pancreatic cancer risk here is not the bacterium itself. It is the sustained gastrointestinal inflammation that chronic low-grade food poisoning creates over time. Repeated episodes of subclinical digestive distress, the kind where you feel slightly off, slightly bloated, slightly nauseated but not dramatically sick, create an inflammatory environment in the gut and the pancreatic ducts that over years elevates cellular stress. The CDC and WHO both identify Bacillus cereus as one of the top 10 causes of foodborne illness in the developed world. For elderly adults whose immune systems are less equipped to manage acute bacterial insults, the risk of serious complications is significantly elevated. The protective rule here is simple but exact. Cool your cooked rice within 1 hour of cooking. Refrigerate it within 2 hours. Never leave cooked rice out overnight. And when you reheat it, heat it only once, bringing it to an internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit, and then consume the entire portion. Do not put half reheated rice back in the fridge. This is not complicated. It is a timing discipline, and it genuinely matters. Remember when I mentioned food number 3, the one almost every American household reheats every week? This is it. Leftover fries. Reheated roasted potatoes. Yesterday's potato wedges from the air fryer. This is perhaps the most universal senior kitchen habit in America, and it is also the one with the most direct acrylamide concern. Here is the chemistry, simplified. Potatoes are high in an amino acid called asparagine and in reducing sugars. When you cook them at high heat, above 120 degrees Celsius, which is 248 degrees Fahrenheit, these compounds react through the Maillard pathway to form acrylamide. The darker and crispier the potato, the higher the acrylamide concentration. When you reheat those fries the next day, especially in an air fryer or regular oven trying to restore the crunch, you are performing a second high-heat processing event on food that already contains acrylamide. The concentration does not simply stay the same, it increases. Research on thermal processing hazards has identified acrylamide as having neurotoxic and genotoxic properties, meaning it can damage DNA, in addition to its probable carcinogenic classification. For the aging pancreatic cells of someone over 65 who eats reheated fried potatoes 3 or 4 times a week, that is a meaningful cumulative dietary exposure. The pro tip here is temperature management. If you are reheating potatoes, do it in a regular oven at a lower temperature, around 300 degrees Fahrenheit, rather than high heat. The goal is to warm the food through, not to re-crisp it to the point of browning. A slightly less crispy fry is a safer fry alternatively. And this is a practical tip for seniors on a budget. Boil or microwave your potatoes fresh rather than frying them. Boiled and steamed potatoes have extremely low acrylamide levels. The problem is specifically the high heat crisping and re-crisping cycle. This one is counterintuitive, and I want to be careful about how I frame it, because leafy greens like spinach, kale, celery, and beet greens are profoundly protective foods. Their dietary support for vascular flexibility, cognitive resilience, and anti-inflammatory balance is well documented. I am not telling you to stop eating them. I am telling you to stop reheating them. Here is why. Leafy greens are naturally high in nitrates, inorganic compounds that your body actually uses in beneficial ways when you consume them fresh. The enzyme systems in fresh leafy greens help regulate how those nitrates are processed. But when you cook spinach or kale and then reheat it, you denature those enzyme systems. And what happens to the nitrates without those protective enzymes in place? They convert into nitrites. And under continued heat exposure, those nitrites can undergo further chemical transformation into N-nitroso compounds, the same category of probable carcinogens we discussed with processed meats. This is not theoretical. The nitrate-nitrite conversion pathway in improperly reheated leafy greens has been documented in food safety research for years. The concern is compounded when leafy greens are combined with protein-rich foods and reheated together, because the protein breakdown products provide additional reactive nitrogen for compound formation. For seniors over 60 whose pancreatic tissue is already managing the normal wear of decades, this is a meaningful dietary modulation factor. The pro tip: do not batch cook leafy greens for the week. Steam or sauté them fresh in small amounts. If you do have leftover cooked spinach, eat it cold, tossed into a grain bowl or on top of soup, rather than reheating it. And here is a bonus pro tip that has nothing to do with reheating. If you are eating spinach for its iron content, always pair it with a vitamin C source, a squeeze of lemon juice, a few cherry tomatoes, a small glass of orange juice alongside your meal. Vitamin C dramatically increases the bioavailability of non-heme iron from plant sources. That is a pro tip most people never hear. The fifth food is not a single ingredient. It is a cooking method applied to a class of foods, and it is one that creates a category of pancreatic stress that is both well-researched and almost entirely preventable. Fatty, oily dishes, curries, stir-fries, casseroles, sautéed meats in oil, anything prepared with significant fat content, undergo a process called lipid oxidation when reheated, especially when reheated rapidly at high heat. Here is the key biological connection. The pancreas produces digestive enzymes that are specifically responsible for breaking down dietary fats. That means the pancreas is the organ most directly exposed to what you eat when it comes to fat processing. When oxidized fats, fats that have been destabilized by high heat reheating, enter the digestive tract, the pancreatic tissue experiences a concentrated oxidative stress burden. Research on thermal processing hazards confirmed that lipid oxidation during frying and reheating generates trans fatty acids, peroxidation products, and advanced glycation end products simultaneously, creating a compound effect rather than isolated individual risks. For someone eating reheated oily food 3 or 4 times a week over many years, this is a genuine long-term concern from a dietary support standpoint, not from a single meal, but from sustained cumulative exposure. The protective rule here is heat management. Reheat oily dishes low and slow, covered on the stovetop, with the addition of a tablespoon or 2 of water to create steam and prevent the oil from exceeding its smoke point. Alternatively, reheat in a microwave at 50% power in intervals rather than at full power, which creates thermal hotspots. If you can, cook fresh portions of high-fat dishes rather than making large batches for the week. For seniors watching their food budget, this may mean smaller, more frequent cooking sessions. But the protective compounds in freshly cooked food are genuinely worth that investment. And when you do choose oils with higher smoke points and higher polyphenol content for your initial cooking, extra virgin olive oil for moderate heat cooking, avocado oil for higher heat applications. These oils have natural antioxidant compounds, protective polyphenols, that partially mitigate oxidative stress compared to standard vegetable oils. I want to make this genuinely useful for you, because I understand that for many of you, cooking every meal fresh is not realistic. You may be cooking for one. You may have limited mobility some days. You may be on a fixed budget. These are real constraints, and they deserve real solutions. So here is what I recommend building into your kitchen routine. And none of this requires expensive equipment or a culinary background. First, the 2-hour fridge rule. This applies to rice, potatoes, and any cooked grain or starchy side dish. 2 hours is the maximum window for sitting at room temperature. Set a phone alarm if you need to. Put the containers in the fridge before you sit down to eat, not after you have been watching television for 3 hours. Second, label everything. Get a roll of masking tape and a marker. Write the date on every container before it goes in the fridge. A simple rule: if it has been in the fridge more than 2 days and it is a starchy food, put it in the freezer or let it go. This is not waste. It is protection. Third, batch smart, not just big. The goal of batch cooking is efficiency, not just volume. Instead of cooking a giant pot of rice and reheating it all week, cook smaller portions more frequently, or freeze individual portions immediately after cooking and reheat from frozen rather than from refrigerator stored. Freezing stops bacterial activity almost entirely. Reheating from frozen directly to 165 degrees bypasses the room temperature danger window. Fourth, build a leafy green habit that does not involve reheating. Buy a bag of pre-washed spinach or mixed greens once a week. Use it in salads, smoothies, and as a base layer under warm food rather than as a reheated hot side dish. The nutritional profile, including the protective compounds, the bioavailable folate, the anti-inflammatory flavonoids, is significantly higher in raw or lightly steamed fresh greens than in reheated ones. Fifth, for seniors on a limited energy budget, meaning days when you simply do not have the energy to cook from scratch, keep a stock of protective convenience foods that do not require reheating at high heat. Hard-boiled eggs prepared in advance. Canned fish like sardines or wild salmon, which can be eaten cold. Hummus and fresh vegetables. Cottage cheese with fruit. These are not inferior options. They are smart, protective, and genuinely aligned with healing foods for the elderly. Sixth, your kitchen equipment matters. If you are reheating food, a food thermometer is one of the most protective investments you can make. You cannot judge food safety by how warm something feels to the touch or how long you left it in the microwave. Internal temperature is what matters. 165 degrees Fahrenheit. Write that number on a sticky note and put it on your microwave. And finally, none of what we discussed today is a reason for fear. It is a reason for informed adjustment. Small changes to these 5 specific food habits, made consistently over time, genuinely shift your dietary risk profile in a protective direction. That is what evidence-based senior nutrition looks like in practice. I want to end with something I say often on this channel because I believe it. You are not just a passive recipient of your health outcomes. You are an active participant in them. The research on pancreatic cancer and its growing incidence in people over 60 and 65 is sobering. But buried inside that same research is a clear and consistent signal. Dietary choices matter. The foods you eat, how you prepare them, how you store them, and how you reheat them. These are within your control in a way that age, genetics, and many other risk factors simply are not. When I think about the seniors, I most want to reach with this kind of information. The people sitting in their kitchen right now, making everyday choices that feel small and routine. I think about the decades of life that lie ahead of them. People who are 65 today can reasonably expect to live into their mid-80s or beyond. That is 20 or more years of meals, of mornings, of time with the people they love. Protecting that time is worth adjusting how you reheat your rice. It is worth being thoughtful about your leftover sausages. It is worth knowing that the spinach you eat fresh today is delivering more protective compounds to your body than the spinach you microwave tomorrow. These are not sacrifices. They are small, sustainable calibrations that compound. Just as the risks compound over time, the protections compound too. If you found this video valuable, I would like to ask one thing. Share it with someone you care about, a spouse, a sibling, a neighbor who cooks for themselves and might not know these things. The research tells us that the highest risk group for pancreatic cancer diagnoses is between 65 and 74. The people in your life in that age range deserve this information. In the comments below, I would love to hear from you. Which of these 5 foods surprised you the most? Was there anything here you already knew? I read every comment, and your responses help me understand what to cover next. Subscribe if you have not. And remember, the goal of every video on this channel is not to frighten you. It is to make sure that when you walk into your kitchen tomorrow morning, you know exactly what you are doing and why. That knowledge is one of the most powerful tools for healthy aging that exists. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourself. You are worth it.